Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L coming in with My Hero Academia chapter 344, my thoughts, my opinion, my review. Hey everybody, it's been a long week for me, but I'm glad to be here. Recording this video very late on Sunday night. Hopefully I'll be able to get it done and out for tomorrow morning. Anyway, hey everyone, so 344. So general thoughts for me on this one, I gotta say, I'm really worried, I'm concerned. But like my concerns are coming from like things that Horikoshi has said before. At the end of the day, I just want the kids to get a lot of screen time. At least give them something, right? In this chapter, you have Monama getting something, and my big point is I want to see more from Monama. That's really what it all comes down to. I want to see more from him. I want to see more from Shinzo, but there's reason to believe that Shinzo might be getting more later on. Yeah, as I'm looking at the chapter, it's just that that trepidation. I just want to see more from the characters. So when I was looking at Monama's dialogue, it's concerning because Monama's dialogue is addressing one of his big issues, that being that fear that he's going to be a second bit character and all that kind of stuff. When it comes to Monama, I really hope he and Shinzo get another moment and maybe they work together on something. That'd be really neat. So fingers crossed. I gotta tell ya, like with regards to the rest of Class 1B, I've given up on those characters. If Kendo gets something, that would be amazing. But for those characters, they might just have like a simple just thing in the background or something like that. There's just too many characters. We'll have to see how it goes, but that's definitely one of the feelings that I have going into the chapter. Especially with Monama, because we knew he was getting this moment, or he was getting a really good moment. It's just concerning that this could be the moment. Anyway, on this chapter 2, we got the clarification for Shinzo, and this is worth the general note. So last week, I was going down the angle, disregarding that it was quirk shenanigans, thinking about all the technical ways that this could have worked out. This week we find out, okay, no, it is quirk shenanigans. So with this situation, personally, I would have preferred the technical stuff, but there's nothing wrong with having quirk shenanigans come into it. There is something that the author did that I thought was really interesting, just because it kind of indicates where his mind is at. But overall, with quirk shenanigans, the unfortunate thing is that you lose out on getting something tricky that anyone can pull off if they thought about. So you don't get that really relatable kind of approach to dealing with All for One by using technical truths or something like that. On the flip side, though, the thing about the quirk shenanigan is that it kind of saves All for One a little bit, saves face for him a bit, because with All for One in this situation, it's like, can All for One predict for every single possible quirk that could possibly counter him? That is a little bit too much. For such a wide situation. You guys know I was one of the ones that criticized heavily like the heroes thinking that everything would be okay with Gigantomachia, so much so that they made the assumption that Gigantomachia, there was no way to reactivate him once Shigaraki was dead, which I still think extremely unreasonable. But with this situation with All for One, there's too many options, there's too many powers that could mess with him, so I don't think he would actually make contingencies for everything like that. One thing that is maintained here, though, is that they still banked on All for One's overconfidence. So his overconfidence here led him into making compromised decisions, but, again, reasonable. Like, could you predict that Shinzo would have this power that would allow people to talk to you without actually getting any intention from them? I would say that if you were to do this like on the technical side, probably the way to do this without using Shinzo, you would probably, given the state of detachment, you probably have to need someone who is like super meditative, maybe even in a trance. Actually, a trance would have been the other interesting thinking about it. A trance would be the way to go about this if you were in a less powered setting, but then you'd have to go find a hypnotist, and at that point it's pretty much, actually no, now we're talking about it, that's 100% another power that could have messed with this if we're talking about just putting people in trances. So point is, ultimately we get the quirk solution. Nothing really wrong with the quirk solution. There are pros and cons to it, just like there are pros and cons to doing it the technical way. The technical way makes All for One look stupid. The quirk saves face for All for One a little bit more. Do I have any other big general notes? I don't think so. We can just get into the video right now, and then if I come up with anything, I'll let you know. And sorry if there's something weird in my camera. I was trying to fix it, but I'm not sure what exactly is going on. Might be the light level right now. Anyway, going into 344, it's titled Stars. we start with a flashback. Now, this is just kind of funny, just to let you guys know. On the live streams, we always talk about what's going to be the thing that we get next. This week, it was a pretty simple bet that we were going to get a flashback starting the chapter. So one thing to definitely keep in mind here, Horikoshi has been doing this since the final arc started. This style that he's doing, this style focuses more on maintaining momentum than it does maintaining a coherent story. The reason that Horikoshi does this, like in this case, this chapter, you can see that, you know, he's holding back information because he wants the surprise. So he's building suspense with it, artificial building of suspense. Nothing wrong with it. Weekly manga, that's a technique you can use. With this style, what he ultimately does is that he minimizes the slow moments and he maximizes the exciting moments, and he controls when the slow moments happen a little bit more. The value here is that if you were to do this all in chronological order, you might have slow chapters, or you might have pretty much like maybe even 4 extra chapters of slowness. By doing this and breaking it up, you pretty much just go into a situation where it's like 3 pages of explaining something that the readers really want to know, and then the rest of the action. This is what he's going to be doing. Anytime we see something really dramatic happen that has no story, that has not been talked about in the story before, or, you know, was left purposely vague, we're going to see a flashback at the beginning of the chapter. I believe, yeah, this happened too with Meteor and all that kind of stuff. It's just the guy's style now. As a reader, what you have to just keep in mind is that Horikoshi will 100% justify any random thing that he comes up with by putting in a flashback and saying, look, it always happened. Same way he did with the Meteor thing. And depending on how you feel about the Meteor thing, you can evaluate whether or not you like the style. Anyway, on this page, one of the critical lines here is definitely All Might saying, "We know All for One too well." One big thing that you have to take away from this is that All for One is super predictable. There is no way that you come out of this without saying All for One is super predictable, because All Might predicted him. Mind you, All Might predicted him at this stage. The issue here is, like, does All for One know that All Might can predict him, therefore he will do something that All Might can't predict because he knows All Might can predict him? We'll have to see if he goes there. Anyway, on the first page, you just get the reaffirmation that this was hard. One of the interesting panels for me was the bottom third, where you have Kaminari pointing out that Bakugo was saying that all along, but hearing it from these guys hits different. I really just gravitated to that line because of just what this line does for Bakugo. When you look at the line flat out, it's just saying, yeah, Bakugo was always right, but, you know, we weren't really listening to him. We weren't really actually thinking that he was right. We weren't actually thinking that he was on the right track here. That's what the hearing it from these guys hits different. That's ultimately what it says. They're just saying, like, yeah, hearing it from people with authority is like, shit, we're in a really bad spot. So what makes this line really interesting is what happens on the next page immediately. And this is really, I think, a product of just the gag with Bakugo. Anyway, on the next page, what you have is Bakugo ultimately making sense of what Tsukachi and All Might told him. And what's really interesting here is how Sero comes in to be the funny guy and says that's one interpretation. Now, what's really interesting here is just the dynamics of this. Because when you say, like, the one interpretation and you see the hyper-aggressiveness of Bakugo's words, the thing is, Bakugo is right. Bakugo is always right. Like, very rarely is Bakugo wrong because he's just so hyper competent. What you actually have here is that on one page you have the characters pointing out that Bakugo was right all along, and on the second page you have them engaging in the same thought process that leads them to invalidating Bakugo. In this case, the invalidation comes in when you're, like, breaking down Bakugo and saying, oh, that's one interpretation, but you know, come on, it's not like actually like that. No, it's actually like that. So, you know, what does it actually mean for the reading experience? Not much. This is just Horikoshi. Well, it depends. On one interpretation, it's just more of the same. It's just Bakugo being hyper aggressive and everyone else around him just kind of listening to him but not really taking it in because it's so hyper aggressive. On the other hand, Horikoshi might be setting up a thing where, you know, Bakugo will always be correct, and what Horikoshi is using to instill doubt in the reader is his hyper aggressiveness. Mind you, I don't think for people that, like, watch YouTube videos about Hero Academia, I don't think, you know, you listen to Bakugo and think that he's 100% wrong. I mean, I think you listen to Bakugo and you're like, yeah, no, this guy has a point. Most times, the readers will be thinking that Bakugo has a point. So what's unfortunate here is that the characters are playing catch up with the readers when it comes to listening to Bakugo. This one just caught, like, it's a really small thing, but it caught my attention just because it's actually really incredible just seeing one page of people acknowledging that Bakugo is right, and then not even 3 panels later, someone devaluing Bakugo's extremely accurate summary of the situation. Now, on page 2, the second panel set, that one is a little bit interesting. It's the one about, we're going to let them see that we're making mistakes or that we're exhausted and panicking. It did not look to me like they were exhausted and panicking. This is one of those spots where the author is telling you that this is the situation. But with me, like, thinking about it, I saw Izuku go back to school, and then I saw him go out for a recon mission one day, and that's it. I can't say I personally saw them panicking. They seemed pretty calm there. Izuku was moving in a group. So seeing this, like, really the only part I could see that maybe is panic. Actually, I can't see any panic. Even Izuku leaving UA was a pretty smart move because ultimately it calmed down the population. It thwarted All for One. I don't see panic when I look at the post Izuku returning to UA. I just see a happy time. Heck, man, now I'm kind of a little bit sad that Jiro didn't get to put on her concert or whatever she was gonna do, because then it would be like, are you sure? Are you sure they're panicking? That doesn't look like panic. If one of the interesting things about these first couple of pages is that, they're telling us a lot of stuff that we already know, but at the same time, like, for me, there was a little bit of a disconnect just because, like, I don't see all of the reality of what you guys are saying. They don't take Bakugo seriously. I don't really take them seriously. But whatever, it doesn't really matter. I'm sure they look like they're panicking on some level. I just don't see it from the Class 1A perspective. Anyway, across 2 and 3, we get the whole narration about, like, okay guys, yeah, there's a lie detection method, blah blah blah. One of the saddest things about this is that we don't really have Sukachi mentioning anything about his own quirk, even though he is connected to this whole thing. That feels like a wasted opportunity. Anyway, that leads us into the introduction of Shinzo. Now, page 4 and 5. What's the most interesting thing here? I legitimately could not care about anything about Shinzo joining up in the hero course. This is such a dumb thing to be waiting on. It doesn't really matter because Hero Academia is ending. I legitimately could not care less about this whole thing with him ending up there. I legitimately couldn't care less that they stopped with the moving up a grade. Bro, it's an apocalypse. I don't care that you didn't get into the hero course. That said, this is just stuff that Horikoshi is putting in there just to, it's nice connectivity. It's connectivity. And at the end of the day, if a kid's able to talk about, going to school and all that, yeah, that's the bias to normalcy, but that's also just, showing a kind of happiness, or just kind of like the belief that everything's going to be all right. If you can complain about not being able to move up to your grade officially, you think you're in a good mental space. Now, the critical thing here that you have to also appreciate from Horikoshi, because this is just him being a smart storyteller, he points out that Shinzo said he can't make other people speak, and he has Suyu saying this. And I believe it was also Suyu that found out about this because she was on his team that back in joint training. Again, joint training, very valuable. That's valuable because just as Horikoshi remembers the little details, and again, it reminds you, super aware, maybe even paranoid to how aware he is. And I'll show you, and then we'll talk about the panel that makes it seem like Horikoshi is super paranoid about these things. But the critical line here is at the bottom of page 5, where he says the method to make it work is even more intense. This is a really critical line because it shows exactly where Horikoshi's worries are. If you were writing this, think about why would you need to say this part when you don't actually show any of the difficulties later on. Mind you, you might still want to show these difficulties maybe 10 chapters down the line when you're giving Shinzo his big moment. But what you ultimately have here is an excuse, in my interpretation, because again, like, the value of that line only exists to say, like, hey guys, look, All For One's this really big threat. He's got this really aggressive power. It's really overpowered. But hey, we're going to take it down by using this other power that's very hard to make it work. So what this is, at this stage, what this is a situation of telling versus showing. This is more of a tell. he's telling us that this solution is well earned and would be difficult to pull off, giving it an artificial or an illusory kind of quality to it to make it feel justified. Um, the fact that he puts it in there is the big indication. This line, without this line, you don't know how hard this is to actually pull off. And this is what makes thinking about a technical solution to countering All for One more interesting, because in a technical solution, the logic itself, like going through the hoops to try and justify how they could do this without powers, that in of itself would have been the work needed to make it work, as opposed to Shinzo just telling us about the work needed. So ultimately, I find page 4 and 5 to be I find page 5 to be the most interesting page, just because of that little thing that happens in there. I think this is one of those spots where you can see a little bit into Horikoshi's mindset. And again, for you guys, the readers, do think about, and if you were going through this sequence, would you add that little detail in there? And if you do add the little detail in there, like, why do you add the detail? Ultimately, for me, I see adding the detail there as a stopgap. Page 5 also has the thing about the hero name. Shinzo doesn't reveal the hero name, which is what ultimately tells me that we're going to get another thing with Shinzo where the hero name is revealed, and I can't wait to see that. Okay, on page 6 is where you get to see the paranoia of Horikoshi here in full display, where he has Nezu point out that even though Shinzo hasn't earned his provisional licenses yet, the acting president Mera has given him special permission to act during this crisis. Mera is that sleepy guy from the commission. Now, there was some confusion. The commission is overworked. The commission hasn't stopped existing. It still exists, but it's in disarray because one of its main players was taken out, right? The commission was still there the whole time. It's again, whenever the characters talked about the commission, it was just they had too much on their plate right now. But good to know. This line, though, honestly, I wasn't even thinking about it. I legitimately, that provisional licenses are the furthest thing from my mind. What matters, though, is that it's not the furthest thing from Horikoshi's mind. Horikoshi thought that it was valuable to shove this giant text bubble in there and tell us about this. What's valuable here is knowing just for sure that Mera is the acting president. Not that it really matters because Hero Academia is ending. But the fact that he felt that it was important to justify where exactly Shinzo's permissions lie, that seems to me indicative of just wanting to cover all bases to a very paranoid degree. But again, shows you like Horikoshi like really dots his I's and crosses his T's. As I'm looking at this though, considering how rigid Nezu is, I find it extremely funny that people were calling Izuku a vigilante during the early parts of the Izuku by himself era, because it's like, nah, that kid was not a vigilante. There's no way around it. You don't have the three guys. All right, not the point. Moving on. After this, we move into the whole Kurogiri thing, with Monama being the guy who used Warp Gate. I thought the sequence was good. The spoilers made this look really bad, but I'm glad that Horikoshi was better than the spoilers. On page 7, one of the cool things is that Vlad was referring to Monama as his hero name, just adding the air of seriousness to it. And then on page 8, what's actually super interesting is the transitions from Monama talking about Eraserhead to talking about his personal rhetoric. And so what's actually really cool here is how he talks about how, Eraser, without you, it would have been a massacre. And the way he goes into talking about how people said that he'll never be a superhero with that quirk, that's important because Aizawa himself is an underground hero. I feel that when you have that conversation there, he's pretty much saying that, you're a guy that probably couldn't really be a superhero with that. Or, Monama might be seeing Aizawa as a parallel to himself. And that is valid considering that Shinzo is the one trained by Aizawa, and Shinzo is someone that Monama also sees as a parallel. So all that said, it's just pretty much like, you're a guy that is probably like me, but you were able to be so fundamental. And this just leads into this whole big thing here with Vlad telling him that there's no such thing as a bit player and that Monama has been and always will be a star. So, the star rhetoric, I prefer the protagonist that I saw on the over on the translations and the fan translation. I thought that was a better thing. This is pretty much the equivalent of you can be a hero to Monoma. Or in this case, Vlad is saying that you were always a hero. So really good. Like the spoilers made it sound like Vlad just said like, oh, you will be a hero this time, and didn't address anything else. So really good here. As for Kurogiri, because Aizawa has that moment there. I think Shirakumo will still have one moment. Aizawa also talks about his erasure, so Horikoshi pretty much just sets up, well, Aizawa won't be using erasure that often. This might be trying to get the viewers into a false sense of security, because Monoma can 100% copy erasure, so, we might still see erasure if Monoma decides to use it. On page 9, we just see little things of how Shinzo controlled Aoyama's mom and Aoyama. Horikoshi also shows sweat just to say, hey, this was actually really hard, but whatever. This very difficult thing was covered in less than a page. Page 11 is the Russian. Now let's see. What I really like about this page is that there are actually a lot of Endeavor sidekicks here, and I love seeing Mirko's. Oh, I don't even know what to call that, man. Like, holy crap, man! If she punches someone, they're dead. Holy crap, moly, bro. All right. I think this is also the first time we've seen Burning post-war, so it's good to see her still there. Actually, what we really gotta appreciate is that all of the relevant Endeavor sidekicks are still with Endeavor, which just goes to show they probably know how much this guy works. The valuable thing on page 11 is how All Might predicted All for One, assuming these, again, they might be clones. We gotta be ready for that. But the logic here it makes All for One look kind of stupid, because the logic is, yeah, he came here thinking he was gonna steal One for All, and then he came here thinking that he's going to run wild immediately after stealing it. The problem there is, like, this guy has seen how tricky Vestige World can be. He has very limited experience in Vestige World. This guy knows that Star and Stripe, like, ripped apart his Vestige. And he wants to try and take the quirk that has the vestige of 8 people that hate him. One of them is All Might, who we know he is terrified of. What I'm trying to say is, All for One is like really overconfident if he thought he could take One for All without feeling any kind of like drawbacks to that. Unless specifically All for One, the body, wasn't thinking of taking it and implanting it in himself and was instead giving it to Shigaraki kind of thing. But it depends on the interpretation on this line. The big thing here though, like, I think it would have been smarter to come out, grab Izuku with your like elite force, and then just pop back. He can hide. This guy can hide forever. Like, quite literally, All for One being in a rush is one of his biggest weaknesses in this whole thing. Page 12 is a page where I have to say, like, oh, you know what? I forgot to give props to people, but I have to give props to Sarge, because Sarge had said something about it being Shinzo's quirk. Sarge was actually really believed it. And then gotta give props to commenter White Despair, because White Despair pointed out very early on that Shigaraki might not be able to use Decay. So just to see what he was talking about here, you can see that Shigaraki's hand is touching the ground. What's really interesting is that the hand that twitches has veins in it, like anger. Maybe Shigaraki's angry, or he's trying to force something down there. So if Shigaraki's not using Decay, there's a lot of possibilities for why that could be. My big bet right now is that little Tenko is preventing the use of Decay right now. I know other people might have been thinking that Star and Stripe might have damaged the Decay quirk. We'll have to see how this actually goes down. Right now, it looks like Shigaraki can't use Decay. Anyway, we go into page 13, or anyway, go to the bottom, page 12, where we have Dobby telling the leader that he can't be bossed around, and then him saying something that really makes it sound like Dobby didn't think Endeavor was going to be here. The whole fancy running into you thing. And then after that, we go into page 13, which reminds us that Dobby is still a joke, and that the author thinks that Dobby's a joke. Specifically this face. This is the face of a joke. I do feel bad for Dobby, because it looks like even just using his fire now, he's like burning himself up on the inside. But Dobby's life is suffering, so this guy's gonna die, guys. Like, this guy's gonna die laughing, man. Like, this guy is not getting out of this manga alive. This is a miserable life. Unless Eri shows up. I don't think that's happening. Okay, page 14 is the most ridiculous page by far. I think that when you have Shoto coming out of the portals, and you have him referring to Dobby as "you big jerk." You know, I am not an apologist enough to be able to ever get behind that line. I find that line so incredibly reductive of everything that Dobby has done. And I find it to be so apologist that it's ridiculous. Imagine going up to All For One and being like, "Yo, All For One, stop mind violating Shigaraki, you big jerk." Like, bro, you sociopath, you psychopath. There are stronger words other than jerk. Man, I wish we live. No, 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 because this would be infuriating. But imagine if we lived in a world where you go up to a guy that's incinerated over 30 people at least, who killed a law enforcement officer by burning them alive. Imagine going up to that person and calling them a big jerk. Shit, man. No, man, that's just funny. That's just extremely funny. We'll have to see where that goes, but like that's just honestly, if there's something that you could call Dobby being a jerk for, it's that he has the gall to walk around with how bad he stinks, right? Like that's a jerk move for sure. But this guy's a mass murderer. This guy's responsible for the death of hundreds. He's not a jerk. He's a psychopath. Anyway, yeah. Just reminds you that you're reading a children's manga. Okay, so page 14 and 15, they lead us into Operation Troy, Tempt and Trap, and so remember, this is where we start seeing how they're gonna do Plan A and Plan B, right? This is the beginning of Plan A and Plan B. They're about to do the separation. Now, I do wonder what's going to be the counter for All For One, because All For One can just teleport everyone back. We better hope that someone next chapter explains to us what the weaknesses of the Black Goo quirk are. Maybe in a flashback at the beginning of the chapter, we'll have to see. But that's one of the big spots here right now. It's how are you countering All For One's teleportation? Now, at the bottom of page 50, this is something that I am really gonna just harp on, but you have to really appreciate that Nezu has the power to completely redo the underground of a city 30 kilometers from UA. This is no longer just a rodent or a super smart rodent. This man is able to change infrastructure without anyone noticing. All For One did not know this went down. And I want to talk about the tech here, because there are some kind of weird things, and I gotta praise Horikoshi because I think he was relatively smart about this. If you zoom in on these images of the cages, first thing to really appreciate is that the All For One cage is extremely tall because All For One was flying. You have to ask the question, did Nezu know the exact location where All For One was going to teleport into? I doubt it. I doubt anyone did. What's interesting is that when you look at the floor here, you see that there's like dents in the floor, like stuff has been missing. I just want to talk about this because this seems like it's more, this seems like technology on the level of a quirk. What this seems like to me is that this technology is super responsive and is super adaptable. And what Nezu pretty much did was the equivalent of earthbending, sort of. What it looks like he did was that he took the mass that was in the metal, and it's like he's manipulating the metal itself, and then the metal forms the cage. Like, it's not like he had panels installed. It's flat out, yeah, no. It's kind of like nanobots or some kind of, you know what, Big Hero 6. Big Hero 6, where they had those little robots that kind of just made different shapes depending on how you kind of, or like how the villain controlled them or something like that. It seems like this is a situation where no matter where All For One was, he was always going to be captured in the cage he was captured in, just because the metal would always be able to react as if it was like someone metal bending or something like that. Point is, this is just really hardcore technology and just makes it more impressive. But mind you, Nezu is the one that turns a shelter into a paradise full with robot servants, so there's really nothing this guy can't do. Page 16 is a page that brought some interesting kerfuffles on the live stream. One of the critical lines here is Sukachi saying that we once failed to put him down and he may have ripped out your guts, but we're both here still alive. It makes it sound like Sukachi was there with All Might at the fight. And one of the things about this line is people were saying Vigilantes, and I remember this chapter, I think it was in Vigilantes, either that or in Jump Giga, but Vigilantes had a chapter where you see how Sukachi met All Might. and how he found out the secret, and it did not make it seem like this guy was present at the All for One fight. So this part here, you know, I would like clarification on this in the future. I don't know if he's already clarified on Twitter or something, but I would like to know how this whole thing with vigilantes works. And the thing is, this line is so unimportant that the author could just nix it, just modify it a bit, and call it a day. Like, he doesn't have to overwrite vigilantes on this one, but we'll have to see what exactly happens here. And apologies if I'm behind the curve on this. Oh, you know what? Also seeing Monama's face here, I forgot. Monama had his really creepy face here, calling himself the man behind the curtain. And it's like, kind of wish he could have been a little bit more somber for that, but okay, you know, that's pretty Monama. Anyway, and at page 17, like, All for One's figured out that All Might just wants to split him up. Last thing I want to say here is the bottom of page 16 with Izuku speaking. Or, sorry, not Izuku speaking, but Izuku looks like he's running towards something. So it seems like he wasn't caught inside the cages. That seems to imply that the majority of the heroes weren't caught within the cages. It's likely only villains are in the cages. Given how much space they had, I could really believe that as well. So hopefully there's no one in those cages. With the teleportation, it looks like all the metal cages are vehicles, so that's pretty cool. Again, another point to Nezu. The bottom page 16 is again reminding the readers that All for One has a giant ego. He was super overconfident. They played it up because they knew they could take advantage of it. And you have also the note that they were drawing him from UA and drawing him away from the new fort as well. So really interesting how they kind of put Troy back in there. But overall, yeah, that's chapter 344. I think I covered everything I wanted to cover on this one. Yeah, no, at the end of the day, you know what? I think this was totally fair. Now, you know, because of the law of narrative, we kind of know that Plan A is not going to go 100% correct. We also know that things have to get bad enough for Hawks to come in and bail us out. So I hope that we get to see just some neutral stuff for the next little bit. I hope we get to see the villains kinda on the back foot for like 2 chapters, and then we can go into like the villain counterattack. Now, given how the war went, we're probably gonna go in a roller coaster again. There's gonna be probably like the bad times and the good times. But yeah, for right now, I would love to have the heroes kinda keep at least a neutral effect, if not a positive one, for the next 2 chapters, just to, you know, feel good about it. Overall, though, that was chapter 344. Fun chapter. Guys, let me know what you thought down below. And until next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day.